Hi, friends. Hello, the world. Welcome back to this episode of Complaint Free Life. And I continue introducing to you different tools for transitioning purposes or in life in general. And today I decided to introduce my number three tool, and this is a tool that I have simplified and put together based on so many teachings from so many coaches, in particular my coach, Brooke Castillo. So that's why the way that I wanted to present it to you is how I use it in my life. And I'm also trusting that it will be useful for you. So this tool is extraordinary and ordinary self tool. And you may have heard different versions of this as well. Highest self and ordinary self that I talked about it last time in my one of my posts. So the idea basically is how can we use all the tools within us to get to the goal that we want to without relying or reverting into anything external if we don't want to, right? Because oftentimes what happens in the transitioning journey is that because of the fear or because of the anxiety, because of many other emotions that move us to be searching for answers somewhere else, searching for advice or searching for recommendations from other people, but maybe not so much we're paying attention to all the tools that we have within us. And even if we're paying attention to, maybe we're paying attention to one-sided story rather than to both sides of the story of how we could look at anything that we do, any decisions that we're making. So the the tool is extraordinary and ordinary, meaning that we have each of us, we have within us the ordinary side of us and then the extraordinary side of us, right? So the way that you can think of it is we have the ordinary side that is responsible for the ordinary routine things, the unconscious things that we do, which is absolutely necessary. Otherwise, we would be learning everything from scratch every time, which would be exhausting and difficult. So therefore, we have that ordinary side of us. And then we have the extraordinary side of us that is something conscious, that's something we decide to do and change anytime we want to based on so many different elements. So that's why I thought that I would present it to you. What are the tools that you might be missing out within you already? And I would love to bring your attention to those tools. And then I will also show you the way that I apply in my life, the way that I suggest to my clients, and also you can apply it in your own life as well. So the way that I see the extraordinary part of it is where we can make conscious decisions, right? Or when we can make conscious acts of this is what I want to do, this is how I want to live my life. This is the conscious part of it. Excuse me. This is also where the new self concept can be created, meaning the one that we really want to aspire to, the one that we really want to become. And this is where we can start looking at how we want to be, who we want to be, what identities we want to take up, what personalities, what characters. All of this can lie in this extraordinary side of us, meaning that we have that within us to think about how do I really want to be? Who do I really want to be? And what kind of life I want to live, right? And then it's linked to obviously how we see ourselves in the future, meaning that how we would love to be in, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years, or even within 1 year. And how do I see myself living myself and being myself? This could all be done within our extraordinary side of the spectrum of our thinking process. The same goes for long-term thinking, right? So we have this ability to think in terms of, okay, how do I want to uh, be approaching my life if my long-term vision is this, right? So how do I want to live my life now if my long-term vision is this? Um, the same goes for all of this, like in the dream advocate part, which I think is underrated or underused by so many of us, is meaning that whenever we think of making decisions, making changes, we often go to the ordinary side of things of what could go wrong. instead of looking at also what could go great and how we could achieve that. So going to the ordinary part would be the automatic part of our lives, right? So all the things that we automatically do without, we don't even need to think about doing it, we just continue doing it. All of this comes under the ordinary side of it. And by ordinary, I mean the things that we already know, the things that we have already been living that way. If you will, it's also the current version of how we see ourselves, right? How we view ourselves. And a lot of them could also be based on the past, meaning that whatever the things we have achieved so far, and the current self, meaning also how do we see ourselves, of who we are being, what are the things that we usually do, what are the feelings we usually have. And then this also ties into how we may be looking at the short term, thinking of what are we going to do tomorrow, what are we going to do soon. And also here we tend to then, sorry that you can't see it, it's like I wrote here, fear safety advocate, right? So we have this safety advocate that always ensures that, okay, even if you want to transition, have you thought this through, have you thought this through? And then we tend to look at more of the past based estimates of what could go wrong, rather than we look at what could go right. So I know when I present it to you in this way, it may sound a bit like a split personality thing. Don't worry, it's not the case. Because even within our brain's structure, we have the parts that we use mostly for unconscious behaviors that we do on a daily basis, and then we have the higher brain or higher self, whichever the way most people call it, is the part where we then decide how we want to consciously do these things, and from now on, how do we want to approach something new, right? So therefore, we have both of these abilities already within us. Now, even if many of us may know that this is existing and this is how it is, but may not really use it because probably many of us believe that this part, the ordinary part, to change is very difficult, or many of us maybe even believe that it's not possible, right? So that's why we don't tend to spend a lot of time here in the extraordinary part, because we just believe that, well, we are already here in a good place, we are already doing things, things may just have happened to us, and now we just keep flowing in that journey, and therefore going and creating this consciously on purpose and working towards it sounds a lot harder or difficult, or maybe for some people not even possible, and therefore we tend to mostly react in our lives from this side of it. Now, the reason I am introducing this, obviously, is because I'm a great believer that we can always change whatever we want to the part that we want to. And coaching is a great tool that helps us to do that, but there are many other tools as well that you can think of. The way that I would love to suggest to you to apply this is in the following way, in the two categories. Don't worry, I will explain this in a minute. And this is my way of simplifying things, so I hope it will come out simple as well. So in the first category, obviously using this for yourself or with yourself, right? So when you use the extraordinary side of you and the ordinary side of you can use it for yourself, but you can also use it with other people in your relationship with other people. And I will go into details how that could look like. But let me first explain to you how you could be applying this higher self or the extraordinary self in the ordinary self in your daily life. And the way that I propose it, that you apply it to how you're thinking currently, how you're feeling currently, how you're behaving currently, and how you are creating the outcomes, the results that you want in your life. Okay? So the way that you could apply extraordinary and ordinary self-concepts is, for instance, if you're thinking currently in one particular way, let's say that you are considering transitioning, right? And you have come up with lots of ideas of how you could do it. And then your ordinary self would say something like, well, it's not going to work, right? So this would be your ordinary self based on the past, based on the current thing. Your ordinary self or your ordinary current self concept would say, well, it's not going to work. You cannot make it happen. It will be too difficult, whatever the things that arguments that your brain will be saying, which is absolutely normal because all of our brains do that. And in that case, how you could apply the extraordinary side of you is you could ask yourself, how would my uh, new concept or your new self concept or the version of me who has achieved the transitioning, who has achieved all of these things, how would that version handle this? How would that version of me would be handling these thoughts or these arguments? How would I respond to those arguments, right? Or another way of looking at it is, how is my extraordinary self could handle all of these situations without making it a problem or without fearing them being a problem. So do you see what I'm saying? So instead of asking many other people or surveying other people as to what they think and how they think, which may be very beneficial for you to think about, but the most beneficial thing could be when you rely on your inner resources of that extraordinariness that you have. Like my coach often talks about, we all have extraordinary, which I love, love, love. And I truly deeply believe that's the case. So that's why don't discount your own extraordinariness within you, and ask yourself, how would the extraordinary me handle these type of difficult situations or difficult questions of it's not going to work and all of this, how would I make it work, right? This is how you would apply it. And then you start mining your own answers and finding out how that could be true as well. Do you see what I'm saying? So on the one hand, you are giving the airtime or the attention, enough focus and attention to the ordinary, but I would love to advocate that you give enough attention to the extraordinary side of you that also looks at how would you solve this? How would you make it work? How would you overcome those challenges? And then you start getting creative as to what your answers could be. The same goes for feelings. Now, here, one other ways that I would love for you to pay attention and apply this is, for instance, your ordinary self would be noticing what the feeling currently you're experiencing, for instance, anger, overwhelm, stress, excuse me, whatever other emotions that you may think of that you observe in your daily life, right? And then you could, excuse me, you could ask the extraordinary side of you as to why are you choosing to feel that, right? Because I was introducing this recently that whenever we shift the question from why am I feeling this, which oftentimes what we say, which is very important, and we want to find out why we're feeling it, but it may be even more mind-blowing answers that comes up if you ask the question of why are you choosing to, because then you have the power, you have the agency over what you're feeling, and then you start getting curious as to why you're choosing to feel it, even though it may be happening unconsciously that you're not aware of it. But once you start shifting the question in that way, your brain starts revealing the actual truth of what's happening. So for instance, one of the things that I often ask myself is, if I feel, if my ordinary self is like, oh, I'm confused, right? And then my extraordinary side, I could ask, why am I choosing to be confused? What's the use of it, right? And then my brain start then revealing that the reason why I'm choosing to be confused in that moment is because I'm afraid to move forward. I'm afraid to go to transition because I'm afraid that it will work and all the things. So you see, that's why extraordinary side of us has the extraordinary ability to reveal all the truths about what's going on within us. Now, the same goes for behaviors, right? Whatever the things that we're doing, not doing, we can always get curious from both sides of within us of looking at how it's now and how we are, uh, what kind of behaviors we're wanting, and being very intentional about it and start acting upon it or start doing those things. For instance, we could say, if my extraordinary self would solve these problems, right? So problems of it won't work and da da da. And if my extraordinary self decided that it will make it work, what kind of things I need to be starting to do, or what kind of things I need to be doing differently than I'm doing, right? So you get curious from your extraordinary side of yourself to look at what behaviors you need to be changing in order to get to what you want to. The same goes for this. And here, what I would love even to offer, even additional things to think about, is that you can look at the results and outcomes of life that you're having now. And then you can think of, if I was really believing on my extraordinary side of making things work the way I want to, what kind of outcomes would I like to have in my life currently? Or in the future as well, right? And what kind of life or what kind of results I would like to have XYZ now, and start getting curious from your extraordinary side of it. And then just don't limit yourself as to what else you could be believing, wanting, creating, and all the things. And then start like asking your extraordinary self again, how would you be thinking, believing in order to create these outcomes that you want? So you can see that all of this can be done with a simple shift in mind in terms of what is the current way of default thinking that we're having, and then what is the intentional way we want to be thinking, or the intentional way of us approaching any problem that we're having or any situation that we're having, and how we would solve for it. And then we start relying on those in order to solve, in order to create whatever we're wanting. And that's why I think that we have an amazing ability as humans to have these both sides to check with each other, and then also giving more attention to the side that we're not giving more attention to, in order to start applying those abilities within us. And as I said, you can also use this tool for growing or building relationship with other people. And the way that one of the best ways that I know how to do it as coaches, and many coaches, I'm sure you know this as well, is when we're building relationship with other people, we don't focus on the person that we have now, but mostly on the all the extraordinariness that they have, that they may not even see themselves maybe sometimes, but mostly always looking at the extraordinariness of the person, and then build the relationship in that direction, right? So in other words, instead of like judging, for instance, someone that, oh, why this person did this, why this person did that, he shouldn't have, she shouldn't have, and all the things, instead of judging and getting in the they're not acting according to our views way, instead of doing that way, we could look at it, I wonder if they had the thinking like this and therefore they acted this way, right? So extraordinariness, that we appeal to their extraordinariness, makes us also understand them better, or have more compassion, or more ways to figure out why they may have done what they have done. And then we have that understanding, or also we can always um, uh, um, build relationship with them, assuming that they have the resources within themselves to do whatever we would be doing together, right? So for instance, a lot of the times when we are working with people who have suffered uh, major tragedies in their lives, and we're serving them or we're working with them, oftentimes we may be looking at them as vulnerable, as people who have no resources. But what if instead we mostly approach that with us believing, excuse me, and trusting that they have the inner resources inner extraordinariness like we do, and then having those resources to be fueling and to be fueling what they want to do in their lives. And then our job is to just be of service in that moment of their lives, but then they continue with building their lives and further, right? So that's why it's amazing way of looking at always like whenever we're judging people, whenever we're categorizing them into this is the person who can't help themselves, or whatever the way that we may be wanting to get into this habit of categorizing, right? So instead of doing that, we can always check to, I wonder how their extraordinariness would handle the situation, and how they would find the resources within themselves to do the things that they really want to do, right? So trusting that they also have the same level of extraordinariness. Maybe they don't really recognize it, or some of them don't recognize it, but we know that we all humans have it. So that's why how we could always appeal to those side of the people rather than to the side that we just see in that moment. Right. So this is the tool that I wanted to introduce it to you. I hope that you will give it a try. As I said, that whenever I think of myself as I have the extraordinary side and the ordinary side, and I can always check with my extraordinary side for making decisions, for moving forward, for approaching problems, then I feel more empowered, more in charge, and more able to do a lot of the things and solve in the ways that I haven't considered before, rather than always looking at only what I am good at or what I have done so far, and then just looking at it and saying, oh, this is I haven't done before, so I don't know how to do it, and then getting stuck. And that I find is not really useful. So, my dears, my appeal to you is rely on your both extraordinariness and ordinariness to combine the amazing two spectrum of the resources together to get to the goal you want to, so that you achieve the transitioning in the successful way that you want. Okay, my dears, have an amazing weekend and talk to you next week.